Let's talk about Kramer Bussel's Beyond Yes or No Consent as a Sexual Process. So, Kramer Bussel argues that we need to stop thinking about consent as just this one moment of yes or no, and instead recognize consent as an ongoing process. Now, this is fairly uncontroversially entirely correct. Consent can always be withdrawn, consent can be modified, it can be changed. It is this ongoing, incredibly important, foundational aspect of sexual interactions. However, I do want to raise 2 points of caution while reading and thinking about this text. First, Kramer Bussel uses the enthusiastic model of consent. This is importantly better than thinking of consent as that mere moment of yes or no, but there are also serious critiques of this model, which I discuss in the consent video. Two is that Kramer Bussel tends to blur together consent and sexual communication. Now, communication is necessary for consent, but the way that Kramer Bussel talks about consent and communication is as if they're just entirely the same thing. So I want us to reflect on that and on whether there is the possibility for consensual sex where communication just wasn't great. So, sexual encounters that might have been entirely desired and wanted, where everyone was careful to check in with one another and make sure that their partner or partners wanted this encounter, but where the sex was ultimately unsatisfying because the participants didn't really know how to talk about what sort of sexual experiences they really wanted. Do we actually want to say that that was non consensual? It's really, really common to feel awkward talking about sex. Our social world does not encourage discussing one's desires or preferences or fantasies. And so most people don't really have the skill of talking about sex. Many people don't even know how to express what their sexual desires, in fact, are. Do we really want to say that all sexual encounters that have maybe not great sexual communication are necessarily non consensual? That strikes me as warping our notion of what consent means in a way that risks erasing the harm and the moral weight of sexual violations. So I want us to reflect carefully about whether Kramer Bussel might be blurring together consent and sexual communication. We can, however, reframe Kramer Bussel's point to be one about the importance of sexual communication, of discussing one's desires and preferences and boundaries and anxieties and fantasies and interests with one's sexual partner or partners. She suggests using yes, no, maybe checklists as a way to open up space for these kinds of conversations. This is one strategy amongst many that we ought to be developing to enable people to have these kinds of important conversations. While I've raised concerns about the way that Kramer Bussel has framed some of her argument, her overall point is a crucially important one about the centrality of ongoing consent and about the fundamental role that ongoing sexual communication plays in healthy and flourishing sexual encounters.